Hi there, and welcome to Intangify. I'm your host, Matthew Asbell. And today, our guest is Matthew Rubin of Fovea IP. Matthew has this great, interesting background as a musician, as well as a researcher and a general brand geek, if I may call you that. Matthew, tell us a little bit about your background.
Sure. First of all, that was spot on. I would definitely call myself a brand geek, a trademark geek, a music geek, a geek of all sorts of things. But I am the director of business development for Fovea IP, trademark solutions company. We've got offices all around the world where we're able to help brand owners, trademark owners, prospective trademark owners on how they can enforce their brands, help clear their brands, and everything that is involved in the life cycle of that trademark.
The first thing I want to make sure we do is address, the purpose of your being here on the Intangify podcast. And as you know, the Intangify podcast is about intangible aspects of business. You and I regularly encounter the same intangible thing over and over again that we always talk about because of how our careers have revolved around each other over recent years, uh, and that's and that's really the intangible of relationships. But I kind of like to call it, in the context of talking to you, I kind of like to call it the intangible of non-sales. So can you tell us a little bit about how you are not a salesperson, even though you're the director of business development?
That's a good point, Matthew. And I always like to tell people, prospects, clients, people in the industry that I come across or outside the industry, I am the director of business development. I am not a salesperson. I was never a salesperson. I didn't come up to be a salesperson, never had ambition to be a salesperson. Just came to be because I enjoy talking to people. I know that's stereotypical to say, but it is honestly true. If you told me 20 years ago, Matthew, you're going to be the director of business development, selling business to business solutions, um, I would have I would have just laughed. I would have just laughed and laughed and laughed. Yet here I am. And it was when I started asking questions to people, to trademark practitioners, to business owners, to brand owners. Um, it kind of Sales didn't come first. It became about curiosity. It became about curiosity about business, about commerce, about words, about images, things that are important when it comes to trademarks, and even then marrying it into copyright, into patent, into design patent, trade dress. There is this whole world out there that I almost look at like a puzzle. And there's this industry involved in it. And I was very lucky that it fell in my lap, kind of, maybe back in 2002, 2003. And as I'm talking with all sorts of practitioners, all sorts of business owners around the world, everybody seemed to have a different story. When you're working in intellectual property, you kind of have to know a little bit about everything. And if you don't know a little bit about something, you're eventually going to have to learn about it. When it comes to something involving trademarks, in anything, any good, any service can have a name or a logo associated with it. And when that happens, you kind of have to learn about the landscape of certain marketplaces. And data that something like Fovea IP provides can bring you to a really, really rich point as far as knowledge. But there is something about whether it's just breaking bread with somebody and talking about a practitioner's experience with it, with their customer's experience, with the experience of owning that brand. Maybe I don't know anything about ball bearings. Well, there are, I don't know how many thousands of trademarks there are, whether it's logos, whether it's word marks that are associated with ball bearings. I better know a thing or two about them. So I end up, as you're saying, I'm a geek with all things, including this. I end up going down these rabbit holes. Sometimes these rabbit holes are with data, and often it's with people. And when I talk about things like that with people, I kind of come across maybe gaps in their workflow, problems they're trying to solve, and it encourages me to learn a little more about their industry themselves, what their needs are, and it is almost like reverse engineering a sales process. I did not come up in this industry, as I mentioned, with any sort of technique or method, learning things like med pick or the challenger method when it comes to selling. These are things that I was introduced to later on. It was just a natural curiosity about everything. I started watching Jeopardy when I was young. I'm a trivia geek, along with all other things, and I think it lended well with that. And when, as I mentioned, it moved away from data and got into people, just like yourself, Matthew, I enjoyed talking to people like you, and it was always about things. It was always about problems. It was about common ground, and kind of the things involving sales and what your needs are, and when it comes to what products that a company like Fulvia IP specifically had to offer, that's something that came organically into the conversation. Initially, the conversation is just about what is the topic at hand. Let's talk about this specific industry. Let's talk about a law class you can be teaching. And what the needs are there, and how I can help out. What is my experience there?
There's actually so much to unpack from that answer, and I'm struggling to decide where to begin. I think I wanna start, go back to some things you said early on, in your answer, just because I think some of the words you used and some of the things you described about what you do and what you learned is a little bit alien to a lot of entrepreneurs. I think we need to, like, especially because we're sitting here like talking the talk, and I want to make sure we walk the walk in terms of you know, not just saying to people, gee, relationships are the intangible you should care about, but rather showing them that. And, here you are talking about data and trademarks and whatever. And I got to think that anybody listening to this, watching this podcast, has got to be thinking, well, why does this guy have all these guitars behind him? And what does that have to do with Fovea IP and trademarks and all this stuff he's talking about? So let's break it down. Um, why are there so many guitars behind you? And what does that have to do with this data IP, geeking out on trademarks you've been talking about?
It has everything to do with it, Matthew. I went to college, and near the end of my time there, decided I want to give a shot at being a professional jazz guitarist. Um, I went to college to be a high school history teacher. That didn't happen either, but this is something I tried to do. I graduated. Here I'm aging myself. We're talking about, oh boy, 2020, 2001. I graduated college and tried to give it my all as a jazz musician. Very, very difficult to do. Very, very, very difficult to find any success in it. I'm ambitious, I'm curious, and once I found that maybe being a professional musician wasn't the avenue I wanted to go down, I wanted to be in the music industry, and sent resumes to all the companies that I recognized as a musician. One of them being a copyright, that kind of a performing rights agency, and I was working in music copyrights for a couple of years, and kind of working with songwriters, producers, publishers, and kind of dividing who gets the shares of the use of their songs when that copyright is involved. Now, after doing that for a couple of years, is want to grow and graduate to the next level, and I really wasn't sure where to go with that in the music industry. Still wanted to play guitar, but you know, still need money to live in the city. I moved out and had an apartment in Manhattan, and like, well, it's not a cheap place to live, and I got to make my rent. So I was working as a research analyst, was my technical title at the time, and sent my resume everywhere. And a company that was doing trademark research gave me a call, saw my resume. I had no idea there's a connection between copyright and trademark. I really didn't understand the concept of intellectual property. I knew about music, I knew about guitars, I knew about songwriting, I knew about song structure. This is all secondary stuff that was coming to me. But I took the interview. I got the position, and I started doing trademark clearance searches for brand owners and attorneys, where they would provide the company I was working for with a word, the goods and services associated with it, and that word being a trademark that they either want to go to market with, or they need to kind of see the landscape of the marketplace. And I started doing these searches, and a lot of it was a manual process. And the way I looked at it was not that dissimilar from looking at song structure. I'm taking different words and I'm seeing how they can be confused with other existing marks in the marketplace. Putting my feet into the shoes of a consumer, walking down a supermarket aisle, a department store aisle, and seeing as a consumer, am I going to be confused by the name of that shirt, perhaps, and another shirt next to it, what the brand was, and then playing around with those words, as I mentioned, kind of like a puzzle, and then ultimately taking this information, providing it in a report. And I had all this data in my hands, and I'm learning a lot of things about a lot of different industries. And it was a moment that really kind of it just opened my curiosity even more. And when I started learning about the relationship between copyright and trademark, I kind of put it all together. It all is kind of musical, and that is kind of organically how I got that first step. And one of the great things about being a musician is playing music with other people. So I have conversations with musicians. I can improvise with them. I can share charts and we try to play with each other. I found that same type of relationship when I would talk with customers. So it became something that, as I mentioned before, it's about curiosity. I was not in sales at the time. I wanted to learn more about what they were doing with the trademark. I wanted to learn more about their structure. I wanted them to hear what I had to say about the landscape of the marketplace that I was coming across. And these conversations started to happen again and again with the same people. And we developed a rapport of just learning and kind of anticipating things about what they might need, what I might have to say. And it's kind of like playing with different musicians and having, maybe whether it's improvisation, whether or it's chemistry, and it naturally gravitates, and you get, becomes a well-oiled machine almost. Talking with customers, talking with practitioners, sales is not in the equation. And then suddenly I kind of learn a little more and I want to solve some of their problems. It's not just about the trademarks themselves, it's the tools that these companies like FOVIP can provide for their customers. And customers will call in, customers will email, they'll have questions. And it's not so much, all right, I have an answer, you know, thank you for your time, you know, and maybe I'll never hear from them again. I kind of want to hear afterwards what they're doing with it, how they're enjoying their experiencing. All of the follow up that comes with it becomes important. It becomes almost a partnership where a practitioner or business might be using a watching tool or a trademark clearance tool. They're ordering searches for clearing trademarks regularly. And I want to know what they're doing with it, how they're doing. There's always different needs. Sometimes they're always coming out with different products. If they're an attorney, maybe they've acquired a new client that has a business model that they're not used to, and I can learn along with them. So it became more of a partnership than sales, and growing that relationship with them as they are growing their business. It's almost like you're moving along together. That is at the crux of it. It's never about, checking a box and moving on to the next one, checking a box and moving on to the next one, things of that sort. It's just not in my nature to do that. And maybe it's just from the background I had, not initially being in sales. And it's more about just the music that I started out with.
Yeah, actually, I love the analogy about playing with others, musically. I'm also a musician, and as you were describing that, I was thinking about, just singing harmonies with someone, right? Or putting together, multiple instruments and the joy that comes from that. And I think, you didn't use this term, but I think the term that you might have been thinking or that sort of the elephant in the room behind what you were saying is alignment. Essentially, like you align on the language, on the expression that the person you're communicating with is speaking and is sharing. And so if you kind of hear what they're expressing and you align with it, you put yourself in their shoes, you think of it the way from their approach, and you think about maybe the things that they're missing and how you can add to what they've provided. You create harmonies. You create a bit something better than the sum of its parts. I'm not sure if you agree with sort of the analogy that I've extended of yours, but this idea of aligning in language um, and harmonizing with your customer, just like you would with another musician, really struck a chord for me.
Yeah, I think that's a good term when it comes to alignment. Another one that actually came to my mind, kind of along the same realm, is what am I doing when I'm listening to music? What am I doing when, oh, I just gave the word away there. I'm listening. This is something I do. And this is the natural part of the curiosity that comes out of me. Just when it's music, I'm listening. I'm listening to other musicians, whether it's something that is a recording, it's somebody I might be playing with, or it's a customer, somebody I'm speaking with. How do I want to solve their problems? How do I learn more about it? I need to hear. I need to hear what they're saying. Um, if I'm starting a conversation with somebody new. Now, I'm going to put on my business development shoes here for just a second, because it does come into play here. What do you do? Tell me about your workflow, and let me shut my mouth off for a while. Let me listen. Let me take notes. Maybe I'll come back with questions afterwards. Then I can see where I can fill things in. All right, he's playing in B minor. Okay, I know all the notes that are in there. I can see how he's fitting into that progression that's going on, and perhaps it fits. Perhaps there's gel there. Perhaps we've made there's a cadence and there is a sequence here that fits. And what I can say, what I can offer, is something that responds well, and it's kind of that feedback mechanism that is effective. It's with musicians. It is with the a relationship manager and a customer too. Works exactly the same.
Yeah, if you're expressing while you're listening, which is what you do with music, there are aspects of music which are call and response, right? I do something, you imitate it or you respond to it, but there is also kind of active listening right while the music is happening. So while I'm expressing my part, you're expressing your part, and we're and if we're in two different keys, it doesn't necessarily sound good. Right? It sounds good when we are, go back to my term, aligned. So we have to kind of know what key the other person's in, what they're doing, what it sounds like they're doing, and be doing that on the fly while we are contributing our parts. Which is a challenge for many people, I'm sure. But I think we could take that analogy further and further. I want to move in a different direction though, because um, I mentioned earlier, I'm a little bit mindful of our entrepreneurial audience, and for this program, maybe for them this is still alien. That okay, fine, maybe they're musicians or maybe they're not, and if they're musicians, maybe they get that aspect of this. If they're not, in the end, there's still people who have projects, things they're trying to do, businesses they're trying to launch or acquire. I suspect, based on my experience, that a lot of those businesses, at least the newer ones, they don't even know that you exist or when they should go to you. I mean, how do they even find you?
You bring up a good point. They don't know that we exist. They don't know that this industry exists. Um, they're probably maybe aware of intellectual property, the need to clear and enforce a trademark or any sort of IP that they're looking to tie to their business. Um, it goes a lot further than just filling out an application with the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office or whatever jurisdiction that they're in. And in fact, a lot of people don't even know to go that far. But as you get more involved, you learn you need to enforce your intellectual property, you need to protect it, you need to register it. There's the entire life cycle. Now, usually the first thing they will learn about is you should speak with a trademark attorney, and they absolutely should. They absolutely should speak with a trademark attorney. They are the industry experts, and they're going to tell you the best process to go about. Um, registering a trademark, enforcing their trademarks. Uh, the challenge that a lot of brand owners and attorneys have is, they have their space, they have their role in this process. There's certain other spaces that need to fill in certain gaps. One being the availability of certain data. Uh, Data is, I mean, it is invaluable when it comes to this. You need to know, is your trademark available? Perhaps you want to go to business in 5 different countries with a specific word for particular goods that you're selling. And maybe that trademark is only available in 3 of them. In 2 of the other countries, you don't realize there's a brand owner who already has that trademark. They're using it in commerce. They've registered it with a local PTO. If you went to business there, you could be infringing on it, opening yourself up for, all sorts of legal complications. Now, brand owners and a lot of trademark attorneys, IP attorneys will have they will have vendors that they go to for certain services. As I mentioned, this is why I mentioned something like data. Data can be very expensive. Data can be very unwieldy. And what a company like Fovea IP does is we collect data from all around the world. We have 196 trademark jurisdictions, for example, that we are able to capture data from directly from PTOs. Data is very, very expensive, even for a vendor like Fovea IP. But we have these direct relationships with local PTOs where we do not have to pay these fees for this data through another third-party data provider. We can go directly to the source and save that cost for our end customers. So it's a profit center, not a cost center. Now, when we take this data from different PTOs, which is something anybody can do. You want to file a trademark, you want to see if it's available in certain jurisdictions. A lot of this data is public, but it is scattered. It's all over the place. It can take you hours, days, weeks, months to go look and find all of this data, to look at different websites, to compile it, to make sure that it's consistent. Um, what we do with this data once we get it is we clean it, we index it, we make sure it's consistent. That way, when you want to query for this data, we provide you with a interface platform, place where you can enter any sort of information that will pull back trademark records, design patent records, all sorts of records that have this data indexed where it's consistent. You can get through it fast. You can analyze it fast and see if your trademark is available, if it's not available. And that's just one use case if you're using it for a business intelligence tool. You can index things and search them by, say, owner. So you want to see what your competitors are doing in certain jurisdictions. These are all types of information that you can gather from properly compiling data. There's a lot of time saving with it by going to a vendor like Fovea IP, as opposed to going to local PTOs and local websites or even local libraries and kind of doing this piecemeal. So these are services that business owners, uh, practitioners, IP practitioners will, if they're experienced, they'll know that we exist. IP practitioners will know that we exist. We work with them, quite often. But a lot of business owners, when they do go to an IP attorney, as I mentioned before, that's usually step one. That is where the business owners start to become familiar with a company like Fovea IP and the fact that these services are out there.
Yeah, so I actually did one of the things you said, when we had been looking at a search that was done for a name in the United States, and had identified a couple companies that owned this name in a way that was potentially problematic for our client, but our client was thinking about its global approach, and they wanted to know about, you know, well. these guys have this in the United States. Do they have it anywhere else? And I was actually able to use your tool for purposes of looking at each one of those owners and seeing, okay, what is their scope of the rights that they have in multiple countries. But I also want to latch on to what you're talking about. And so you're talking about data being expensive, and and you're also talking about these entrepreneurs who may or may not know about companies like yours. So in my experience, and this is mostly about newer entrepreneurs, newer businesses, or ones that don't have a lot of experience in this area. Um, I see the ones who don't realize they should do any type of search. They just pick a name and then they get in trouble or they don't. Then I see the ones who go, "Oh, I think I should do a search. Somebody said that's something I should do." And they go to the free data that's in the United States Patent and Trademark Office as an example, and they do their own, what I will say, so-called search, in the sense that they put in the exact name that they've come up with. They go, "Oh, I didn't see it. All good," and then they move ahead and either get in trouble or don't. Of course, when they come to us, they ask, we usually tell them, "Hey, you should be really looking more extensively, and here's how we would do it," and we give them options about how we do it, using the tools that you provide us. But we also ask that question about, where are you operating and planning to operate, manufacturing and selling, and where is that going to be in the next few years? To try to think about how broadly we need to search, and if we need to use a tool like Fovea to aggregate across multiple places. But because I see so many of these entrepreneurs, and I would say, I got to say, like 90% of the time, when I'm talking to not a well-established, long-standing large business, I'd say like 90% of the time they don't know that your services exist, nor do they know the benefit of paying for the data that you say is expensive, when they see that it's free in a limited way. You could access the entire United States Trademark Office uh, database, but for free, but you won't necessarily get all the information you need for purposes of knowing that you're safe to move forward. I find that gap to be kind of perplexing, and maybe even in the context of the discussion we were having about sort of musical alignment and harmony, um, troubling, because the idea is like there shouldn't be that gap. They should realize who to go to, and maybe they'll come to someone like me, and I'll direct them, to using services like yours, or maybe they'll try it on their own, or they'll discover you on their own. But most of the time, they won't. And what I'm hearing is a disharmony, maybe too much silence, um, that I wanna fill in, or at least have them consider, right? Because it's okay for them to say, "You know what? I can't afford it," or "I can't deal with the risks. I'll deal with them if they come up, and that's my choice," and to make that choice consciously. But it's the ones who make the choice ignorantly that I worry about. And the fact that they don't know that there is this tool available. Not only that, there's a tool with data, but going back to our main point, behind that powerful, useful tool is a person who cares to understand what you're trying to do and what your interests are and wants to help you figure it out. And will talk to you, not like, dial one for trademark, but rather in the capacity as, let me hear where you're coming from. Let me see what gaps I can help fill. And then I'm not selling to you. You don't have to do this, but here are options as to how I can help you solve that problem, what I need to be compensated for and what I don't. Something like that. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
So you can go to a free site. You can go to the USPTO if you are a business owner and you see this as an option. You'll be able to find some appropriate records there. You'll be able to, perhaps, if your mark exists, in the area of commerce or outside the area of commerce. You can query for it there, and it's going to retrieve those records. Great. You found a record. It could be important. It might not be important. Well, how do you know? All you know is that it's in the same area of commerce as you. It's the same trademark. Well, what about things that go beyond that? Uh, Trademarks and IP in the United States is very complex. It is not black and white. It is just as much an art, or even more so an art, than it is a science. And this is why I think the relationship with a vendor is important as far as coming along the lines of guidance. You pull that record, and you can't really make a decision on that one record. A company like Fovea IP will provide you along the lines of some things to expand on with that record. Okay, well, let me look for things that might be phonetically similar. Maybe there's similar prefixes out there that are very distinct in that area of commerce that could cause some confusion for customers. So if there is a customer of mine that is using our tool and they're speaking just as I did, well, I ran some queries and I found that this trademark is out there. What else can you tell me? Where else can I go with this? Okay, well, let's talk about how a trademark analyst would look at this to provide a full comprehensive search report to a customer. At this point, it becomes an education session for a business owner, brand owner, where I could talk about, places that could be roadblocks, without providing the opinions that an attorney can do. I'm providing just the facts, but I'm also providing some of the best practices out there. Okay, well, you found something that is not exactly the same trademark that you want to go to market with, but it's perhaps owned by a multinational billion-dollar corporation with deep pockets. They really don't want anybody encroaching anywhere near anything that sounds similar to their trademark. Is that something that you're willing to take a risk against? Some people yes, some people no. But we will be able to give you that information because we take this data, and the industry term out there is you massage the data. You kind of find all the information and squeeze everything that you can get out of it. It's things that are being done, very popularly in sports right now. I always think of another analogy here. You have your statistics. I've been watching baseball since I was a little boy, and it's always, I know a player's batting average, how many home runs they have, how many RBIs they have when they're a hitter. You go to a baseball game now, and the statistics that they show on the screen when somebody comes to bat is completely different. Now they're showing things beyond on base percentage. They're showing the slugging percentage. They're showing all sorts of mathematical equations that come along with that. There's different pieces of data that are being pulled out of it. It's no different with trademarks. It's no different with IP. Well, okay, it's not as black and white and saying, how many of this exact mark exist in this area of commerce. No, you got to kind of, play with it. Is this, or if it's not a multinational corporation, maybe it's a smaller corporation, but they're really litigious and they're really protective of their trademarks, where maybe they don't have the monetary backup to keep things going for a long time in litigation. Maybe it's just that first step that you don't want that headache. It's not worth you to have that headache. That there is a good chance that you will receive a cease and desist letter from them. And that's something that you can discover from Fovea IP's data. It's not necessarily something that you're going to discover by going to just a source like the USPTO. And when I have these conversations with customers, these are things that I like to kind of show them along the way. It's for their education. And I learn things about themselves. I learn things about the risks that them or their customers are willing to take. And that allows me to kind of put together in my head, kind of seeing what their profile is and learning more about them, and, what maybe could be used in the next problem that they might come to me with. And, I'm always wondering what happens. So when they, whether they take my suggestions or not, I come to them with a follow-up, just wondering How did it go? What came of it? And it becomes a kind of a post-op, a Q&A. And from there, we can kind of, work on this road and finding different ways. Because, going back to one more music analogy here, I might be uh, competent in one instrument. Somebody else might be competent in another. We both know our scales, our triads, our arpeggios. We have a pretty good knowledge of the great songbook of the world. But we both play completely different styles. We never know what chord is the next one that each one wants to play in a certain progression you're coming together. Um, this process allows us to kind of learn how to anticipate. And the next time I'm able to talk to somebody, hey, I know exactly what chord progression he's going to want to play. He's going to know, or he or she is going to want to know what chord progression I'm going to want to play. And that is what encourages me to continue these relationships. Um, More than anything, it's kind of that gelling. And I feel like a company like Fovea IP, companies that have that type of service where it's not always black and white. We can provide you details. We can open up whole new worlds of information through this data, allows us to explore that.
Yeah, totally agree, except that I think there's a fear of data. You're offering, I can give you information and help you figure it out or enable you to figure out, you know, your risks and what your comfort levels, et cetera, or what you could do. For a lot of particularly smaller businesses, I think there's a fear that they're going to find out something that's going to be bad news, and then they're going to not know what to do, or it's going to cost them an arm and a leg, and that's something that I think larger, more established businesses are more comfortable kind of knowing where they stand on it, maybe more willing to have that information, and strategize with it than to turn a blind eye or put their head in the sand, hoping that that information isn't there. So I think it's interesting, information. It's valuable and also scary or problematic, and what information we elect to expose ourselves to or to be exposed to. I think, I wanna, just sort of wrap this up full circle and say that, data is extremely important. People clearly need services like those you provide and your company provides, whether they know it or they don't. In the end, the intangible of why they should come to you is going to be not that you are there to sell them something, but rather that you are curious to know who they are and what they stand for and how you can best and most efficiently meet their needs. And for me, that's what you have been for many years as a provider of these services. But also, as you mentioned, when I've wanted you to show trademark searching to my law students in law schools, which you've done, I can't even remember how many years, but it's got to be 6, 7, 8 years that you have shown up at no expense to me and helped my students understand this out of, mostly the graciousness of your heart and wanting to know what students were interested in and how you could help them. So I think you walk the walk, and I'm grateful for that and really appreciate um, who you are as a non-salesman.
Well, thank you, Matthew. I appreciate that. I appreciate the kind words, and I do love coming to talk with your law classes. It's more about an education of the industry that I think both of us are very passionate about, and it's not. It is a public service. I feel that I do with it. It is about the education of IP. Why trademark management, trademark searches are important. I tend to start out speaking to people who are, unfamiliar with these types of services with a kind of an analogy where I talk about Chesterton's fence. And for those unfamiliar with it, Chesterton is a philosopher of the late 19th century England, where he talked about somebody purchasing a piece of land and they come across this fence that is there after they purchase it. They're not sure why the fence was ever there. They don't know how, maybe it's been there for 300 years. It's there for some reason. Nobody ever told them why it was there. And so, what's this fence doing here? We really wanted to build, I wanted to put a pool here. I wanted to put a cabana, a shed. It could be anything. Well, this is where I want to put it. I'm going to get rid of the fence. Well, that fence might have had a reason why it's there. Maybe it's a piece of farmland you bought, and it is a queue for livestock or some sort of animals to stay on one side of the fence or another, not encroach on everybody else's property. Maybe that fence is there because it's blocking a ravine. There's all sorts of reasons why that fence might be there. You don't know why it's there, but it might be there for a reason. Don't touch it. Don't touch the fence. In comparison with a brand owner, somebody who wants to come out with they've come up with an exciting name for a product that they have, and they say that I'm going out, I'm going to the marketplace, it's ready to roll. Our marketing team's really excited about it. We put all sorts of collateral out there, and they do that, and all of a sudden, after spending who knows how much money, could be in the millions of dollars, well, there is something out there that exists in that name. You've received the cease and desist letter. They have a case, and you're back at square one. Well, square one can cost you millions and millions of dollars because you have to change it all. And that is showing the importance of preparing to go to market for a trademark. And these are the kind of the elementary, the 101 things I like to talk about with possible trademark practitioners, with brand owners in the future. And I just like making analogies like that. That's one of the more interesting things. And I like trying to talk about these things in a way that maybe can communicate to those who are new to it. And I never found it to be something that, came across to me as salesy, nothing that is necessarily gonna it's gonna conjure fear into anybody. It's just a matter of wisdom and a matter of the knowledge of how the legal structure is in the world. Every country has laws in place. They're different from one place to another. Fovea IP has 196 jurisdictions that we can search trademarks in. There's a reason why they have these. So all these countries value intellectual property, ownership of a business, of the names, of the logos, and any collateral associated with it. It's about being a citizen of the world more than anything. It's not about necessarily selling a service first. We offer great service. I love talking about it. But first and foremost, I learned to love talking about it because I love talking about trademarks. I love talking to people about the way the world works when it comes to words and pictures. And that's why I love coming to your law classes, Matthew.
Well, Matthew, I really appreciate your being here, sharing with us your thoughts, reminding people of the value of relationships as well as data, as well as education. And we'll look forward to seeing you on the other side. Meanwhile, you have been listening to the Intangify podcast, and I really appreciate your being here. Catch us next time.